We've all had a long time to think about what transpired in March of this year.
That is Edwin Frizzell, a regional vice president with the Paris-based Accor hotel chain and the GM of the Fairmont Royal York in Toronto, talking about his team's response to the pandemic.
Every guest accommodation room, all of our meeting and event spaces, the ballrooms, the bars, the restaurants. I mean, we were really at, 100+% as the Royal York tends to do. She's a grande dame in that way. And we literally went from fully operational to within 48 hours, pretty much exiting every guest from the hotel and shutting down our entire operation.
Of course, it was shock, disbelief, people not understanding the amplitude of what was happening.
And that is David Connor, another VP with Accor Hotels.
Right away, as we had to furlough staff, we always have ups and downs in hotels, but never to this extreme. And so we prepared in the first week 275 food baskets for staff.
Several hundred of them at a time throughout many occasions through the summer and the fall, and just getting ready to do another one here as we head into the holiday season.
There is a particular gentleman that we work with that works with food banks here in Montreal, and he came to see us and explained the problem, how food banks will have no more food and we're not producing food, so we won't be able to feed not just the homeless, but people that are in need who generally get weekly deliveries. So together, we prepared over 250,000 portions of food in about a 12-week period. One of the news stories that I heard was of a gentleman who was a paramedic who was very afraid of bringing the virus home to his young children. So he was sleeping in his car. And we invited him to the hotel. He actually became a guest for 3 months. Of course, did not charge him for his stay. We felt at least that we're helping him and helping him serve others.
Now, let's just pause a moment and consider. Here are two individuals working in what is arguably one of the hardest hit industries during this global health crisis, and they're talking about their fortunes not with despair, but with pride. Now, you may ask, how could that be? Well, both Edwin and David agree on the answer. It's purpose.
Our DNA of our brand is to turn moments into memories, and that's really based on the foundation of how we take care of people.
In everything we do, we put through that lens.
Having everyone in your organization agree on what it is you bring to the party is great. And when times are good, it's also kind of easy. It's when your teams face challenges, when things aren't so rosy, that your sense of purpose gets tested. And as you'll learn on this episode, purpose is exactly the thing that is sustaining companies like Fairmont Hotels through this crisis. Our guest is Sharon Cohen, VP of the Fairmont brand, which is owned by the Paris-based hotel chain Accor. She comes from the City of Light to join us at the Nexus. The Nexus, a place where people converge and connect. On this podcast, we look at the things that are changing the way all of us do our jobs. We're going to take a quick peek into the minds of those people who are helping us change. Scientists, HR leaders, and experts in human performance. I'm Chris Nelson.
Sharon, thank you so much for making the time to chat with us.
Well, it's great to be here with you today, Chris.
Fairmont Hotels purpose. Do you have a statement, a purpose statement? If so, what is it?
Well, we have what we call a mission, and our mission is to turn moments into memories. For us at Fairmont, it's about listening to our customers, picking up on small cues, and doing things that are really small touches, but they show our guests and we're thinking about them in a personal way. Those are the little small moments that create relationships, and those are those moments that turn into a memory that lasts forever.
As a leader in the hospitality industry, you're probably in a unique position to tell us how that mission, that sense of purpose, has carried both yourself and your teams through this particular challenge.
When we think about how our culture and how our sense of purpose can help us through a hard time, I think all that work has to start from way before a moment of impact, call it, happens. And so in a way, we've been working towards this moment for a long time. We have a very structured way of how we hire for the DNA of Fairmont. And then we have a structured process where we instill the values of the brand in our employees, and we show them what's expected of them every single day. And so when you have a really strong culture that's embedded in the organization and you have the right people on board, that culture becomes a driving force and it can sustain itself for a long period of time without any kind of formal programming or training to reinforce that. When we came into this moment that none of us expected, it was all about survival. And I think that's when the true sense of purpose of a brand comes out. And if your culture is strong, it will sustain itself through that moment in time. And I think that's exactly what happened.
I'm going to ask you was probably a very obvious question based on your responses, but which to you is of greater value and why? Being optimistic or being purposeful?
Oh, it's such a good question. I mean, I think that regardless of whether you're optimistic or pessimistic, if you don't have that underlying sense of purpose, like I said, you will get lost. I heard this woman who is a great leader, and she had done a ton of research to understand resilience and to understand what makes certain people survive. And so she spoke to a lot of people who were prisoners of war in Vietnam. And she asked them, she said, you were tortured, you were starved, you were beaten. Why did you survive? And why did your fellow colleagues not survive? One of the answers she got was that the ones who survived were the pessimists and the ones who died were the optimists. And at first, that just sounded so opposite to what I was expecting to hear. I was almost answering the question myself. But the optimists kept hoping for an escape. They kept hoping that they would be freed. And every time that they weren't, they were disappointed. And so after multiple times of being optimistic and hoping and believing, they lost their spirit. Whereas the pessimists, in their minds, they said, okay, it's going to be a very, very long time before we get out of this, but we'll get there at some point. And they were the ones who survived.
And you would argue that those pessimists, those survivors, they probably had a sense of purpose about what it was they were doing, perhaps more so than those people who were hoping for some divine intervention.
They had a much longer term vision. And I think that kept them going as opposed to, I only need to survive a couple of weeks because I'm going to be free. When we look at that, comparing it to the COVID pandemic, I think that it's very relevant and it's a very relevant conversation to have because, what I'm seeing is that the people who are really down right now, who are having a really hard time and struggling through this in whatever way, shape, or form, are those people who were so sure, last spring that by the summer, everything would go back to normal. And then in the summer, they thought, okay, we're home free. It's all great. And then they got hit for the second time. And then the second time, I think, was a really big blow, with the second wave hitting the world. And I do think that those people need to have a guiding sense of purpose to take them through a third wave. There's a lot of optimism now and a lot of hope around vaccines, but I think it's going to take more than just a vaccine to be able to help us get back to normal. So I think it is critically important that brands and leaders instill this longer term sense of purpose in their people to give them that guiding vision to help them through.
Purpose gives you the long view that you're talking about, sort of helps you react to things in a very measured way, to kind of quote Kipling, to treat triumph and disaster the same.
Yeah, having that North Star without shifting the goalpost every single time there's a blip on the horizon, that's what gets you that long-term end game. That's how, as a brand, we've survived for well over a century and will continue to survive.
How do you feel personally about how your teams have responded in this crisis?
It's the most beautiful culmination of all the work that we try to do as brand leaders. To watch how our employees have come together for each other and for their communities is amazing. What keeps me inspired is having those ongoing conversations with our general managers in the field. hearing what they're doing, how they're continuing to engage with their employees, even when they're on furlough. They're having town halls virtually. They're continuing to support all of their employees, and hearing about those stories, what they're doing, what's happening in the hotels, stories about our customers who are coming, even though they're very few. Watching all of those amazing things that happened, it touches me deeply, and it gives me my sense of purpose and my sense of meaning.
I think a lot of listeners would anticipate that someone running a chain of hotels in a pandemic might be wringing their hands or cursing the rain, and you're not doing that.
No, I think this is when everything that we've worked for gets put on the table. Right? When things are great, business is great, everything is humming along, I don't know that you get to see the fruits of your labor like we do today. And it's just, again, to me, it's the reason why I'm here.
Well, Sharon, thank you. You've turned this moment into a memory.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
As you've heard, a clear, unambiguous sense of purpose seems to be one of the things that's sustaining both Fairmont Hotels and the Accor hotel chain through this pandemic. And, full disclosure, we at Nexus help make it come to life with their teams. Now, if this is the kind of thing you want for your organization, then let us help. You can find us at www.nexuscommunications.com. That's NEXUS communications.com. And just to note, the holidays are upon us, and for that reason, the Nexus will be taking the next few weeks off. We'll be prepping some new episodes for 2021, and until then, we'll be repeating some of our favorites from 2020, one of the most memorable years of my life, and probably yours as well. The Nexus is a production of Nexus Communications. Kevin Burt is our president and CEO, whom you heard from last week talking on this very subject of purpose. If you've enjoyed this episode, please show your enthusiasm by telling your friends, by subscribing to us, by liking us, or commenting about us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you happen to get your podcasts. I'm Chris Nelson. I want to wish you a happy holidays, and thanks for listening.